Hello there, everyone. Have you ever thought that a piece of clothing from a fast fashion brand could release thousands of tiny plastic fibers into the environment and potentially affect our health simply by being exposed to the sunlight? My name is Mai, and today I will explore this issue through the lens of organic chemistry and explain why it matters. To begin, I know some of you are probably looking at this slide and thinking, come on, why are we starting with the background information anyway? Just get to the reaction and mechanism already. And honestly, you are right. We should skip this part. Just kidding. So, why are fashion and microplastics still such a big issue? Today, the world generates approximately 92 million tons of textile waste every year, yet many consumers still pay little attention to the sustainability of the products they buy. In addition, laundry is a major source of microplastic. Once released, these microplastics can persist in the environment, accumulate in ecosystems, and potentially impact human health. This is why understanding how synthetic fibers degrade and form microplastics is just as important as developing solutions. Next, among the many types of polymer, I would like to focus on polyethylene terephthalate or PET, which is one of the most commonly used polymers in fast fashion textiles. PET contains strong covalent bonds, ester linkage, and a resonating stabilized aromatic ring. Together with its long repeating polymer chains, these structural features make PET durable and stable. On the right, PET is formed through a step-row polymerization reaction between ethylene glycol, a diol, and terephthalic acid, a dicarboxylic acid, producing water as a byproduct. Ironically, the same properties that make PET durable and useful in clothing also allow it to persist in the environment when released as microplastics. Before discussing the main reactions, such as UV-induced degradation, we should briefly mention hydrolysis. It occurs when water attacks the carbonyl carbon of the ester linkage in PET, breaking some polymer chains into shorter fragments and forming hydroxyl and carboxyl end groups. However, under normal environmental conditions, hydrolysis is relatively slow. For PET textiles, UV exposure and oxidation generally contribute much more degradation and microplastic formation than hydrolysis alone. Now we can move on to UV-induced degradation. When PET is exposed to sunlight, the polymer absorbs UV energy and some electrons become excited to higher energy states. This excess energy can generate free radicals which initiate photooxidation and reactions. To demonstrate this, keyword and collectors exposed PET and other polymers to UV light between 275 and 450 nanometer for 5 days in ultra-cool waters. The results showed visible yellowing, indicating structural changes within the polymer, such as an increase in conjugated structures. More importantly, 12 degradation products were detected, including low molecular weight PET fragments and oxidized PET oligomers. The image here on the left shows the polymer film before, while the image on the right shows the same material after the treatment. Visible cracks, fragmentation, and surface damage can be observed. As reactions continue, the material becomes more brittle and can eventually break into smaller plastic fragments, contributing to microplastic formation. So this is the UV-induced degradation mechanism, including the hydrogen abstraction step. For simplicity, I will mainly focus on the radical species generated directly by UV exposure, since the overall mechanism is similar. However, ones produced through the hydrogen abstraction pathway will become important later. After absorbing UV energy, some bonds in PET undergo homolytic cleavage, meaning the bonding electrons are split evenly, and each fragment retains one electron. This generates polymer radicals on the PET chain. These radicals are highly reactive and can abstract hydrogen atoms from nearby polymer chains, creating additional radical sites and propagating the degradation process. At this point, the foundation for oxidation has been established. Polymer radicals now have been generated. The oxidation state can begin with three key steps, each with its own role and name. According to Smith and Jones 2024, polymer hydroperoxides are among the first major oxidation products formed during photooxidation. With the presence of the oxygen, the polymer radical reacts rapidly to form a peroxide radical, which is still highly reactive. It abstracts a hydrogen atom from a neighboring polymer chain, producing a polymer hydroperoxide and a new polymer radical. As a result, hydroperoxides accumulate while new radicals continue to form, allowing the radical change reaction to propagate throughout the material. This is the formation of reactive oxygen species. The O-O bond in the hydroperoxide is relatively weak, so under continued UV exposure, it can break apart. Some ROS already exist in earlier steps. However, this state is called rock formation because hydroperoxides act as a reservoir of oxidizing species and release highly reactive rocks when they decompose, such as hydroxyl and alkoxy radicals. These rocks can further attack polymer chains, accelerating oxidation and degradation. Beyond polymer degradation, rocks are also known to cause biological damage, including oxidative stress, inflammation, and DNA damage when they accumulate in living organisms or are present in excessive amounts. Finally, we arrive at the last and one of the most important steps, transition, where the alkoxy radicals generated during rust formation can undergo a process called B or beta scission. In this reaction, A bond adjacent to the radical center breaks, splitting the PET chain into smaller fragments. One fragment forms an additional carbonyl and increased conjugation, while the other retains a radical center. Throughout the Jan system, the average molecular weight decreases, and you may or may not have noticed that I am using the radical generated through the hydrogen abstraction pathway after Roche formation as the reactant here. This is because B or beta system generally favors the formation of a stable carbonyl containing fragment together with a carbon-centered radical. This product combination is thermodynamically more stable than alternatives involving oxygen-centered radicals, making this pathway more favorable. To summarize, PET does not suddenly become microplastics after a single exposure to sunlight. Instead, the process occurs gradually. Long PET chains are repeatedly exposed to UV radiation, leading to photooxidation, rust formation, and chain scission. Over time, the polymer chains become shorter and weaker as degradation continues. These small fragments can detach from the original five and eventually become microplastic that can persist in the environment. I think that's it. Thank you. Just kidding. Every problem has one or more solutions. One approach is the use of UV stabilizers. These compounds absorb UV energy before PET does and safely release that energy as heat. For example,
hydroxybenzophenone
contains an extensive conjugated system allowing it to absorb UV radiation more effectively than PET. Another approach is the use of antioxidants. Instead of blocking UV light, antioxidants interrupt radical chain reactions after radicals have already formed. For example, Erganos 1010 donates hydrogen atoms to reactive radicals, converting them into more stable species and slowing further oxidation and chain scission. Sulfate-based advanced oxidation processes, AOPS for short, or another approach in which the goal is to degrade or transform polyester microfiber in wastewater. According to Easton et al. 2024, the process begins when UV light activates persulfate or peroxymonosulfate, generating highly reactive sulfate radicals and hydroxyl radicals. These radicals then attack the polyester fibers and create PET radicals, which should sound familiar after all the mechanisms we have gone through so far. Once bad radicals are formed, oxidation, rust formation, and chain scission can occur, leading to surface oxidation and degradation of the fibers. As a result, researchers observed surface pitting and cracking on the polyester fibers, indicating that the oxidation process were damaging the material. However, there is an important limitation. The treatment caused only partial degradation rather than complete mineralization, meaning the polyester was damaged and fragmented. but not completely converted into carbon dioxide and water. On the left side of the slide are two figures taken from the experimental study. Figure 1 shows the process used in the study. Polyester fibers were suspended in water containing persulfate PDS or peroxymonosulfate PMS. UV light, ultrasound, or heat was applied to activate the oxidants and generate sulfate radicals, which attack the polyester fiber. Figure 3 compares untreated and treated polyester fibers. The untreated fiber had a relatively smooth surface, whereas treated fibers show pitting, cracking, and surface damage. These changes indicate oxidation and partial degradation of the polyester fibers. Currently, there is no widely adopted method that can completely eliminate microplastic from the environment. Most existing approaches partially degrade them, therefore, raising awareness of how microplastics are formed is still important. By understanding the problem, we can support future green solutions such as 1. Polymer to monomer recycling is converting polymer waste back into monomers to produce new products like PLA, which contains ester bonds that can be broken using electricity, electrochemical depolymerization, or a catalyst. This convert polylactic acid into lactic acid or lactide, which can then be polymerized again to produce new PLA, creating a circular recycling process. 2. Biodegradable materials develop textile materials that can break down more easily and reduce long-term environmental persistence. These approaches, discussed by Curtons in 2025, may one day have reduced plastic persistence and impacts of microplastic. To conclude, fast fashion textile are not just a consumer issue but also a chemistry issue. Today, we explore how PET is formed, how UV light initiates degradation through radical reactions such as photooxidation, rock formation, and transition, and ultimately contributing to microplastic formation. While there is currently no complete solution to microplastic, understanding the chemistry behind these processes is an important step toward developing better recycle technologies, more sustainable materials, and more effective environmental treatments. The sources used throughout this presentation are listed below. Thank you for your time and attention. And remember, don't give up on organic chemistry after this presentation.
So I'll see you next Tuesday.